we actually got a term sheet from them the next day. And that never happens, right?
This is Funded, a show where founders who raised millions in venture capital share the gritty side of what it actually took to get that money in the bank. I'm Jason Ye. Not too long ago, I was trying to get my ideas funded. And back in the day, I was a VC listening to founders pitch me for money. In fundraising, timing is everything. Go too early and investors pass. Go too late and you're no longer a fit, so investors pass. But what if the best raises sort of happen when you're not even trying? Most founders spend months crafting outreach strategies, perfecting their pitch, and chasing down warm intros, only to hear the same line over and over, not yet. And for early stage founders without a previous exit, without a traditional operator background, that rejection can hit even harder because, let's be real, investors aren't just doubting the idea, it can feel like they're doubting you. The founder I'm speaking with today knows that feeling well. Alex Bazzell is the co-founder of Unrivaled, the groundbreaking women's basketball league. Alex raised $7 million, then $28 million, mostly from his network, mostly on conviction from basketball lovers, outside the traditional sources of venture capital that we normally hear from on Funded. And then, in the middle of a successful first season, one of Silicon Valley's most storied venture firms came knocking, unsolicited, and offered a term sheet the very next morning. Before we get into how that all went down, the no's, the momentum, and the Bessemer breakfast that changed everything, we went back to where it all started, and it turns out the competitive fire that built Unrivaled was lit long before any money was ever raised.
Well, I was the youngest of four, so I had to kind of you kill everything you eat. And I had such a great family of support, highly competitive family. I had brothers that played sports. My sister was in dance. They all went to separate high schools, which was rare. We actually grew up Lutheran, went to all the same grade school, but then some of us went private, some of us went public. But I always had a strong interest in sports. I played every sport growing up. I started to specialize really by choice at a younger age that I fell in love with basketball. So I played year-round basketball, but I still did other stuff for my school. I'm blessed to have parents that, my mom was a dental hygienist for 30 years, but she also was part-time helping in the mortgage business with the company that my dad and his brother started called Integrity. So I'd grown up with this sales mentality of entrepreneurship and building a company that it's kind of all on your back to make it work rather than punching the clock on a 9 to 5. So I was exposed to that early, and that was the lifestyle that, I saw it led to a lot of advantages. Of course, it's highly stressful because you don't just get to lean back and allow everyone else to solve problems. So I think it's always been somewhat in my DNA of that was my upbringing. And I would probably attest a lot of my personality to one, just the environment you grew up around friends, but sports. I think sports, it teaches you at a very young age of how to work with others, how to go through heartbreak, how to go through triumph, how to manage both of those, stay humble, stay hungry. I think my dad was always someone that was pushing, even though there was a lot of accomplishments at a young age for someone that you don't really know what accomplishment means at that stage. But he wasn't hard on me, but he set a high bar of expectation that everything you start, you finish. Anything that you do, you go all out and you go 100% at. You're just not going to participate to participate. So I would probably give a lot of my internal drive from how he really pushed me to be greater than I thought I could be. And my mother was always that calming median presence of loving, making me understand that your worth is not tied up in the results, but there's a much bigger thing. So I would say I'm very blessed to have both of my parents be as impactful as they were in my upbringing and certainly who I am today.
Wow. So the youngest of four, and then parents who were very entrepreneurial. So the models in your life, like, don't look like a lot of the people who looked up to people who had jobs or it was like clocking in. And what I heard was like, I think there must have been a competitive dynamic to everything in your life, whether it be like the food at the dinner table or
Yeah.
just the sports that you played. I do want to sort of dig at that a little bit more. Do you think that like sort of nurtured a very outgoing personality? Would you call yourself an extrovert?
No, I mean, I'm fairly introverted, believe it or not. And it's not usually a
Hmm.
quality because I'm very good at at selling, but I'm not naturally wanting to go out and socialize. Like I really love getting immersed in what I'm doing. When I was in high school, my whole dream was I want to play Division I college basketball, and that's where I put all my energy and focus. And on the weekends, I was very rarely not working out, playing at home. Um, it was very far and few between when I did those things. Well, it was just I love so much what I do and have a drive for what I'm currently is on my plate that that's more fun to me than anything else. So I wouldn't say I'm like extroverted. I'm certainly not highly introverted, but I do lean into being more private and kind of staying to myself. And certainly what interests me is when I am interested in business, I do like being around other people who want to speak about the things that I want to speak about.
Well, I'm glad that I was able to pull that out too, because I think there are a lot of really talented people that have insights into different industries who don't have that sort of extroverted gene. And one of the things we like to dispel is like the fact that you have to be this, you know, outgoing, extroverted person in order to raise capital or build these big businesses. And I think it could be assumed, given your initial intro and all the things that you've done, that you are this like sort of massive personality as
Mhm.
well. So you did say the dream was to play D1 ball, and I totally get that.
Mhm.
You didn't say that the dream was to be in the NBA. I mean, I'm sure that could have been in the back of your mind, but
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more about where you thought your sort of career aspirations would be as you're growing up and trying to get ready to play D1 ball. Did you always feel like you may
Mhm.
percentage chance that, you play pro? Or where you're like, you wanna play the highest level of basketball, and then you're also interested in other things. Do you remember that sort of evolution?
I've always been someone who's, I think, highly
Mhm.
self-aware. And, when I was in high school, freshman year, I was like 5'5". Thankfully, I grew to being now who I am now, which is 6'2". But I never really thought that the NBA was going to be a
Hmm.
option for me. And even though, of course, I believe I maximized everything that I could, I wanted to play college basketball. Then when I got to college, I knew that overseas was a possibility. And then I wanted to exhaust that. Quickly thereafter, I knew that I wanted to stay in sports and what was going to get me to the pinnacle, which turned into being training athletes. So for me, it was a natural transition of how do I cap out everything I can right now and what I'm doing, and now what's next, right? And for me, what's next was actually not the next level of basketball. It was transitioning that into working with athletes and helping them reach wherever they wanted to reach. So it was a natural evolution for me. It wasn't a conscious effort. It was just I somewhat allow my mind to kind of go where this is where I think I need to go to next. So it's strange because if you unpack it, if you don't set that goal of the NBA, are you not dreaming high enough? And it's just strange because my dreams transition into much different ways of coming about. Like I never thought I'd be able to train a lot of the top NBA players in the world. I'm from St. Louis. I
Yeah.
had no connections. There's no NBA team, but I found a way to work myself in that position. So it's just that's always how I've been wired, I think.
I mean, it sounds like you actually quickly transitioned from playing basketball to something that was entrepreneurial, like you said, training up athletes, but
Hmm.
that is running your own business, that is figuring out all the
Yep.
dynamics that go with, being the head of a company. I would imagine that there are a lot of opportunities to tell the Unrivaled story. At Funded, our pod, I focus in on the story of raising capital, which is like a very specific element of what you've done over the last, call it 2.5 years now. So I'm going to glaze over, I'm going to jump ahead and just
Yep.
read out some of the stuff that I could find online about what you've done around Unrivaled. So there was an announced seed round around May 2024 of $7 million, pre any sort of league coming together, any sort of games being played. And then you actually raised a Series A. The headline number was $28 million, bringing your total cash
Hmm.
raise to 35. I think this was in December of 2024. Also, before the first season was even played, I think the first season was Q1 of this year, of 2025, right? January to
That's
March.
right.
And if
Hmm.
we fast forward to today, and we're talking in December, a few months after you announced a round led by a very different name from what you had done before, which is
Hmm.
Bessemer Venture Partners, one of the storied firms in Silicon Valley venture capital. I don't think there was an announced number in terms of how much you raised, but the headline number was that you're now valued at $340 million. So,
Yep.
one, we never try to celebrate the fundraisers because, fundraisers are just fuel for what you need to do. And sometimes more of a burden than it is like something. But there is also the thing that this is hard work to do. And so we certainly should recognize that. Amazing. Now, where I wanted to
Thank
focus
you.
in on was a little bit about this dynamic that I haven't got to chat about with someone yet. And the thing that I find to be interesting is these early rounds, I think you were able to leverage your network, the co-founders networks, into getting some of the who's who in sports, in particular basketball, to lean in around this idea of a 3-on-3 league for women. And so I don't have to as much dive into how are you able to do that, Alex? Like, how are you able to get Giannis and how are you able to get these names? These are people that I think respected
Hmm.
you, respected, yeah, your co-founders. Where I want to dial into is actually the transition to raising from a traditional institutional venture capital firm, right? So if you were to announce your
Hmm.
round in September 2025, I imagine that you were talking to VCs early that year, probably around the time that the season was going out. So I wonder if we could rewind and
Yeah.
just have you describe a little bit around the timing of you even thinking we should probably go raise another round. Or what was happening in the company? How are you thinking about bringing more capital into the league and why? Do you remember that?
Yeah. Well, it's strange because when you first start, it's to your point, knocking down as many doors as possible and trying to convince people that the vision is going to work out. I think as we transition into where we are now, the decision to fundraise last round it was just by happenstance of Bessemer. They had approached us. We weren't even actively fundraising, to be completely frank. So we had the initial success of year one. We had raised our initial 35 million. We had built an incredible business of plenty of runway and cash in the bank, but we also have aspirations that we over exceeded expectations that we needed to progress our timeline of scale. And I think that's the balance internally that we had is, okay, do you want to just continue to kind of chip away at what we're doing? Or do you want to take a little bit bigger leap and expedite? Like, for instance, we went from 6 teams to 8 teams this year. That was the big decision. And we weren't going to go to 8 teams really until year three or year four. So that was a big decision for us. And I think with Bessemer, it became a very authentic conversation. Like, look, we talked to a number of VC firms early that as most people know who listen to this, sometimes it's just not the right timing based on how much you're even raising or where you're at in your stage of your company. But it's important to build those relationships to get one to know one another early, even if there's no chance that you even fit their profile. So I think we did a really good job there of just getting out there and having everyone understand, take a look at us. We'll keep you in the loop. And then the Bessemer combo was they came to us and said, listen, we really want to be a part of it. We believe in the team. We believe in what you're building. And that's really what led to this discussion.
So I'm glad you clarified this early on because that's actually not what I was expecting happened. I sort of expected there to be a concerted effort for you to go raise capital, which means I think what we should actually talk about is maybe the $28 million round the year prior. Like I think this is kind of
Hmm.
where the interesting relationships got formed. And to your point, like people need to have a touch point with you early on to sort of build trust and to understand what you guys are all about. And before we even get to that, some of the words that you're using, some of the sort of the strategic approach to fundraising feels pretty sophisticated or feels pretty almost like tenured and experienced did you have people around the table that were helping you think through this, or is this like sort of learning on the job and just being thoughtful around how you do this stuff? Like how did you even start approaching this?
Yeah, I mean, initially you tap into your network. Before we even launched the league, I had to make thousands of calls of people in the industry. I think we started with John Skipper, who used to run
Hmm.
ESPN, David Levy, who used to run TNT. It was more about this business model in terms of media rights. That's what unlocks most leagues' long-term financial
Yep.
viability. What do we need to do to create an appealing model, right? For us, it was the IP of the players. And then you start talking to other people that they know they want to introduce you to because they think it's interesting. And it's a game of momentum, right? Like you get a few people in and then they introduce you to someone that we should really talk to. And then it's obviously leaning on the players that they're also highly connected with these
Right.
people, right? So, I think your question really stems to how do you even start those combos? Where do you go from
Yeah.
there? And I think the biggest thing we leaned on early is how quickly the space was evolving. And we had the most valuable IP in women's basketball that were
Yep.
committed. And if we could do something interesting, there was a ton of opportunity and upside. So it really transitioned into from going to our initial round, which really was about, look, we have all these players ready to go. We have LOIs ready. We need this commitment to get to the next stage of the
Yeah.
business, right? Because the initial funding of, I believe it was 7 million, wasn't nearly enough to launch the league. And that's why we needed that second raise of the 28 million. And then from there, we could really start building out the league.
Yep.
We sold a sponsorship in Ally. TNT came to the table and said, we'll scoop up the media rights. Obviously, you have to go sign the rest of the players. But having those two pieces then really launched us into a different level of a lot of people looking at us and saying, wow, these guys, they really have it, right? They have media rights, they have sponsors, they have the players. Now they just need to launch, and we need to believe in what they're obviously pitching, which is you build it, the fans are going to
Yeah.
come. So that's really how it all progressed and led to our $28 million raise.
We don't have to go into it, but it does feel like you're the type of person to, find people that know the path that you're trying to go down and like learn from them. You've been a coach, right? Like you probably were getting a lot of coaching and very accepting of that. I have friends who have like sparkling academic backgrounds. I'm thinking of one friend in particular who like went to Cornell and then Harvard Business School. And the first time that she went out to go raise capital, her perspective on what she should expect was like so far off. And she needed to reach out
Mm-hmm.
to people who understood what was ahead of her in order to get to a really sophisticated approach the way you have it. So really
Yeah.
cool to hear. I There is something that I wonder is true about that $28 million round. From what I could tell online, again, a lot of athletes, which makes a ton of sense. And I think maybe
Mm-hmm.
the biggest check came from the Berman family. No formal venture capital firms. And it sounds like you probably did approach venture capitalists, but
Mm-hmm.
to your point, like wrong time or not yet, or
Yeah.
all the things that VCs traditionally, or there's the cliche of like, oh, you're a bit too early, Alex.
Yeah.
I wonder if
Yeah.
you could talk a little bit about maybe the hardest times of trying to raise capital during that round. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I always kind of push founders of even in a successful raise, you're going to get tons of no's, right? Right. Which
Yep.
means
Mm-hmm.
that there is a core disbelief in what you're doing or who you are. Where do you
Mm-hmm.
think that came from all the no's? What did people doubt when people were even thinking about talking to you during that Series A?
Yeah. Well, I think you have to look at it from a number of different
Yeah.
ways. And what you said is true. You're never going to have 100% conviction,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So you're going to get people who pass. I think what was most frustrating from our vantage point early was we went to people who are actively investing in women's
Yeah.
sports and we're like, hey, we're all in it. And then they would pass. And it's like, well, and that's where you can't take it too personal, but it's like, what are we missing
Yeah.
here? So I think you have to kind of look at yourself and go back and say, okay, what are we missing? Why did we not convert? And some of it is just timing, right? Like a lot of VCs just don't invest this early without more stability or at least launching and having a year of playing. So, but two, it's like I'm a former basketball trainer, right? I didn't build a business and have an exit previously. And I think that's some of the hardest where now we're talking to people who are like, damn, we really missed, right? We're talking to people that passed on us early, and they're like, well, we should we definitely should have came in when you were trying to convince us originally. And it's just part of it, right? Like I don't sit here and rub people's faces in it. It's their money. They decide what to do with it, but it fuels us 100% because it's like, well, we have to go prove what we think is right, but also prove what they doubt is wrong.
What I love about Alex's story is that he had every reason to take the no's personally. No prior exits, no traditional operator pedigree, just a former basketball trainer trying to convince investors that a women's 3-on-3 league was worth betting on. After the break, we get into what happened when the right partner finally showed up and why being not in fundraising mode might have been his biggest advantage. The founders I see that do best in company building and fundraising have a secret weapon. Their secret weapon is a community of people, of experts, of peers in the startup industry that they can ask for help from at any time, guide them through processes like fundraising. I wanted to make that easier for everyone else to have access to by building the Adamant fundraising program and community. This gives you access to 75 different training videos around the fundraising process to give you that expert starting point around how to actually execute fundraising, and then access to a community where we host live pitch deck teardowns and office hours every week to make sure that you can ask the minute questions on how your deck should be better, how you should reform your strategy, how you should answer investors who are reaching out to you that you don't know how to answer. So if you want to check that out, if you want to get the secret weapon that I think a lot of the best founders have, check out adamantfundraising.com and join us today.
So that's the internal competitive fire I think most entrepreneurs have of you could look at it two ways. You could kind of beat yourself down and say, well, it's just not for me. I'm not going to get there. Or you could turn it into, I just got to knock on more doors. Like I'm going to get in front of enough people and eventually we're going to get the funding we need and we're going to launch and we're going to prove our success. So I think that's where, listen, anyone who's built a business knows there's a lot of dark days where you just feel like it's all on you. It's not going your way. And then there's days that feel incredible and it's probably always somewhere in between.
Yeah.
So I've gotten pretty good about you're going to have your failures from a day-to-day standpoint, but we just got to keep progressing and learning. So I think that was the initial, like, I'm very aware back to my childhood. I'm very aware of my background and maybe some of the things that they may be thinking without them saying it. And how do I overcome that in a 30-minute Zoom?
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing. It's like you got to sell everything in a 30-minute Zoom. And we also had to answer the fact that the WNBA exists, right? Right now, the NBA players only play in the NBA.
Yeah.
Why are the players going to play in both leagues for the longevity of your, life cycle as a business? So that was the other piece that I think some people can't wrap their minds around because they weren't fully educated on women's basketball. But again, that's my job to update them on why this is going to be not just successful out of the gate, why this is going to sustain for what I believe is going to be for the remaining time of women's basketball.
Wow, you had a really even-keeled description of that or answer to that question because the core did seem, I mean, the hardest parts in the disbelief were there were investors that in particular know that space. They invest in women's
Hmm.
sports. They have a thesis for the future of why like this is an undervalued asset and they were passing on you and you're not rubbing it in people's faces, but that is hard, right? That is hard to feel like, I guess it's me, or I guess it is like
Yep.
not being a proven operator, but I love your description of, well, you said it early on about like the sort of belief or the beliefs that your parents put in you around like, the outcomes don't necessarily define who you are. And the fire of like, well, now we have to prove them wrong. And I feel like a lot of those people that passed are probably talking to you now, which is great. When we come back to Bessemer, this is one of the notes that I put down where I'm like, man, I really want to know about this because Bessemer is a storied firm in my world. Like this is a firm that backed LinkedIn and Shopify and Twitch and Twilio,
Right.
which by the way, those names, those brands like really don't fit Unrivaled.
Right.
And so
Right.
I wonder if you can describe when you first met them. Like, how did you first meet them? When did you first meet them? And like you said that
Hmm.
actually they came inbound after, I'm sure they watched how the first season went. Yeah, but tell me a little bit
Yep.
about how you first met Bessemer and what your first touch point was.
Yeah. They, I forget exactly how it was, but I believe it was just they emailed through someone that they knew. They reached out and said, "Hey, we really want to talk. Here's who we are." Of course, I knew who Bessemer was, but was from one of their main partners in Byron Dieter. And Byron just invested in San Francisco Niners directly, but he's been at the firm for, you know, a long time, along with Steve Kraus, who is more on the healthcare side. But these guys, they're more in tech. They're not in sports, right? So to me, my initial question was when I sat down with them was, why are we appealing knowing that we're not really in your wheelhouse of what I'm looking at your portfolio? And, they have a ton of IPOs that they've backed and been a part of. But I think that we look at ourselves very much as a startup, not as a sports league too. And I think that's what's appealing to them. When we sat down, we actually got a term sheet from them the next day, and that never happens, right? So I think it's the initial conversation, which was about an hour and a half breakfast, but we were talking about what we've done, the success we've had, but also what our vision of where we're going. And I think it was a great conversation, and we were asking a lot of questions to them. What is your thesis? How do you guys attack this? For me, a big thing is we have to build relationships, and if we're going to be in this, we got to plan to be in this for the next 10 years, right? Obviously, hopefully there's something that happens positively before that, but you can't plan for that, right? I want to build the best league I can, and I want to have partners around the table that believe in the conviction of where we're going and understand that you're also going to have to ride the waves with us. If you're going to be a primary lead investor, it's not all sunshine and rainbows every single day. And I got to be able to lean on people when we have to make key decisions that are always going to believe in the conviction of who they've invested in, which is obviously not just the space and the sport and the players, but it's our management team to make these critical decisions. So it was just a rare thing where, again, we told them, like, guys, we aren't really looking to fundraise. We really aren't. But we are looking for the right partners. And we do know we're going to put our foot on the gas, and we're going to need to raise funding inevitably. It's just when and how much, right? So we were so head down in the season that we didn't really have time to think about capital or who to talk to. So they came to us and said, look, let us help you craft where this can go. Here's what we're going to propose. Obviously they dove into the data room and went through everything, but it was a fairly seamless process. And most of the conversations was more getting to know one another, right? Like, of course, they have to ask their questions about the business and see all the financials and dig under the hood, but you also have to get to know one another and know really what that partnership could inevitably be long term. But it's very rare because all of my other experiences of fundraising are usually outreach on this end saying, hey, we're fundraising, we'd love to speak and get to know one another and go from there.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a cool wrinkle to the story that I didn't expect, but I can see the best firms are hunting, right? Even though they're the best, they are looking to see what fits a profile, what fits a thesis. And it seems like Byron, in his own personal investing, started building conviction around spaces. What I really love to note is then let's sort of turn this on its head a little bit, because at this point now you're not raising, right? Which is the best time to be raising. If there's inbound and
Yep.
demand, and now you have the leverage, it's a great place to be. And you underlining the fact to the Bessemer team, we're not raising right now, only serve to make them really want to go after it more, right? They're like, well, we want the thing that doesn't want us. Um, but
Yeah.
what's interesting is that I did sort of outline the top types of investment Bessemer does: LinkedIn, Shopify, Twilio, these tech software investments. And there would be a decision that you would make then, which is, why even go with Bessemer, right? There's the Churnin
Mhm.
Group, there's Courtside Ventures, there's CAA, and a lot of the talent agencies, the firms that have really deep expertise in media and media rights and relationships there.
Mhm.
They bring a lot of different things to the table. How did you think about your own decision to decide to work with Byron and the Bessemer team? Like, what was the core thing around that?
Yeah, well, I think all the success they've had with their portfolio companies, and we have large aspirations of where we want to go, but they have a ton of relationships of partners that are also spending in sports. A big part of our vertical is sponsorship. So I'm a big believer if we can get those introductions at the top quickly, I can build a relationship and get them to understand what their return on value is of being a partner with Unrivaled. And that's really the advantage we've always had is we get to go direct in the door, whether it's a yes or no, we get to the answer we need to. And as a startup, I'd say our number one advantage is we don't have all the red tape. We don't have 80 different people selling. We have a small sales team of 5. I think what's most interesting is we were able to, I saw this number the other day, which is a bit mind-boggling of how well our team has done. But the 2 teams in the NWSL finals, I actually, from our numbers, were outproducing in sponsorships what both of them have done from an overall revenue perspective. But it's because these relationships we're able to unlock quickly, and then our ability to kind of drive value in those are so rare. So Bessemer, their entire portfolio list was a number of people who were spending marketing dollars in sports. So to me, that was an interesting initiative that I thought could be really compelling for us to unlock, knowing how big of a vertical sponsorship is. And then again, it's you got to trust the people that are coming in, right? Like you can peel back everything else strategically, but strategically, we already had our media rights guys in. So we didn't need to go to a different agency to find that. We were doing really well in sponsorships, but we want to put our foot on the gas. So it really came down to that key decision and making sure we were comfortable with the people who were going to be in this and on this race with us for the foregoable future.
Awesome. Alex, like there's a lot to unpack here. And one of the things that I like wrapping up these conversations around is just hearing a little bit about how you think about the next generation of entrepreneurs and, advice you might give them. And in particular, I think it'll be fun to ask you this because you have spent so much time as a coach. I'm sure, I don't know if you've done your own angel investing or you've just now been around many more entrepreneurs, but your network must be
Hmm.
reaching out to you, being like looking for advice, either in fundraising or running new companies. Are there core lessons or core things that you tried to impart on founders as they talk to you about any part of this journey, anything that you like wish you had been told early on?
Yeah, I think the big thing for me is try to simplify what is it you're trying to do, right? Like so many people want to get ahead into all these things that, and that's where you start to confuse people, especially in fundraising, right? Like what's the main differentiator that sets you apart that no one else has, right? Why am I investing my money in belief into you when why can you do this and no one else can? So to me, I think what helped early is I had an advisor who still helps me to this day, who's incredible, and Dan Rosenzweig. Dan was, I think, the CEO at Yahoo. He then was the CEO of Guitar Hero in its heyday. He ran Chegg, which is a public company, and he was always like, "This is too much. Simplify it. Take out 10 of these deck pages. You don't need 30 pages of deck. Like if you can't sell the story in 10 pages, then you probably lost them, right? So I think that's always my thing is what's the simple differentiator and how do you convey how simple and executable this vision is? And I think it's sometimes is plain and simple as that.
Amazing. Well, Alex, you have another season coming up very shortly. We'll be excited to watch this season and all the future seasons. But this has been an awesome conversation, man. I really appreciate you finding the time for us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Cool. That was Alex Bazzell, co-founder of Unrivaled, the women's basketball league redefining what's possible in professional sports. When we come back, I want to debrief some of what I think were the biggest takeaways from this conversation. Alex just told us something that most founders don't get to experience. An investor coming to him unsolicited with a term sheet the very next morning after their first conversation. But here's the thing. You can only take advantage of opportunities like this when you've already done the work, when your story is tight. That kind of readiness doesn't happen by accident. Alex had the reps from countless pitches with players, sponsors, and angel investors. Those are the kind of reps you need. That's exactly what Adamant Fundraising is built for. It's a program I created for founders raising pre-seed and seed rounds who want more than just advice. They want real coaching, honest feedback, and a community of serious peers going through the same battle as they are. You'll pressure test your narrative before it matters. You'll learn to communicate with investors in ways that actually build trust and stimulate interest. And you won't have to figure it out all alone. Because the founders who raise all figure out how to put in the reps first. If you want to do this the right way, head to adamantfundraising.com and apply to join. Membership is application-based because community quality matters. All right, back to the show. All right. This was a really fun episode for me. I don't think I mentioned it enough, but I'm a huge basketball fan, a huge sports fan. So, talking to the founder of a new league that is actually doing quite well and is on trend was extremely cool. There were a lot of great things about this conversation with Alex, but the thing that I wanted to highlight, the thing that I really pulled out was how much of an illustration that this was around how valuable the intersection of deep belief, passion, and excitement for what you do, and hard work are when it comes to building companies, exciting investors, etc. Alex had actually every reason to not get money from other people and every reason for people to doubt him. And honestly, every reason to not actually be able to pull something like this off. But he had that incredible intersection of deep passion for the space that he was working in, and via that a belief that it would work. Like, of course a lot of people along the way would have told him that's a ridiculous idea. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people who don't believe in the future of women's sports, and when I argue with them about how the quality of the game has come around and how media rights are extremely valuable, until they see it happening, they can't grok it. They can't like embrace that potential, that future opportunity. But when you know a space really well and you feel it in your bones, what people say doesn't really matter to you. So you keep fighting. And then when you layer on top of it the hard work that comes from being a competitive athlete your whole life, getting to the Division I level, getting to the college level playing basketball, and honestly being around professionals, you know what it means to put in hard work. You know what it means to get payoff long after all the painful time spent putting into something and not knowing when it's going to pay off. And I think this is a really important lesson to see play out for a lot of founders, because I just had this conversation with a few founders. If you weren't one of those few founders that kind of has a little bit of a screw loose, I would put like an Elon Musk into that, and other amazing founders, people that don't kind of care about I don't know, how people think about you or about the fear of failure, or don't have these like things holding you back. If you're like a normal person, then you better pair yourself with a business and an underlying content type, an underlying industry or focus that really lights you up, that you love, that you kind of have deep belief in your bones, so that you can weather the storm of rejection, and that you just love working in, so that when it's fun, it's fun. When it's bad, it's fun. When it's painful, you still know that you want to be there. Because that combined with real hard work is what gets you to traction points, progress that will get a business running, but also what gets you the sort of conversation and the feeling that investors are looking for when speaking to a founder over breakfast, that makes them want to jump and do a round that no one else is thinking of. All right. So use this as an example of what you should be looking for in the type of business that you're running, the type of startup that you're doing. Don't have it be the thing that you're trying to run just because it could lead to an incredible outcome someday, or saying that you're a founder of a company is cool. That is all the wrong reasons to start a company, and usually the one that will lead to quitting early, because you just don't have that passion, that deep belief, and that well that you draw from, that pushes you to do that hard work. It'll dry up without those two first things. All right. So I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Alex Bazzell. That's the debrief. Thanks so much for listening. If you have any questions about today's show, or maybe you're raising capital yourself and want help problem solving, you can find me on social. I'm at JA, that's JAYYEH, on almost any social platform. And you can email me at jason@fundedpod.com. I also have a newsletter where I share tips, strategies, tactics around fundraising. You can find that and all the other ways that I support founders in their work to fundraise more effectively and efficiently at my website. That's admnt.com, short for adamant. You can find me there and figure out if there's anything that I can help you with.